Hello everybody, welcome to the video. So today we're going to be talking about the EOS R5 Mark II, and we're going to go through the photography menu settings. So I've had this camera for about a month now. I've played around with the settings. I've tinkered with it a little bit. I've done a couple photo shoots. I've done a couple video shoots, and I will make a video talking about the video settings soon. For now, we're just going to talk about the photo settings. So if you're interested in what the photography settings are that I use for my photography with the EOS R5 Mark II, then this is the video for you. So let's jump into the settings. Okay, so we got the R5 hooked up to the Ninja, recording the screen so you guys can see what's going on over there. And let's jump into it. So first we have the JPEG settings, and this is kind of new. I haven't seen this before. So when you click on JPEGs, you can actually determine the quality of your JPEGs, which I mean is useless because I mean, you're probably shooting RAW. If you're buying an R5 Mark II, you're not shooting JPEG. But the cool thing is like if I want large JPEG, I can set my JPEG to large, best quality, and then let's say I'm making a proof gallery for a client, you know, hey, I set it to like quality of 2, so it's just gonna be like little thumbnails the client can go through, or if they're too small, maybe I can do medium or whatever the case may be, but you have the option to do this in camera, which is kind of cool. It'll save you a little bit of space on the memory card, which is awesome. But if Canon, if you end up watching this, you know it'd be really cool. You know it'd be really cool. You know what would take your gear to the next level? If we could load up a PNG into the camera as a watermark, and the camera automatically puts our watermark onto the JPEG, so we can just take them from the camera to the proof gallery, send it off to the client, and yeah, that would be pretty cool. Anyway, that's just wishful thinking. Hopefully somebody at Canon hears that. That would be pretty cool. Next, you have image type size. So this is obviously where you pick your RAW or CRAW, and then you have your JPEG sizes at the bottom. So I just keep it on S2 because that's the smallest JPEG I have. All right, so I'm editing the video right now, and I'm noticing that the R5 that I'm filming with keeps jumping in and out of focus. So it's rather annoying. So I just wanted to stop the video here. I double checked all the settings on the R5. Everything is set correctly. We have subject to detect people, eye tracking is on, locked on, initial priority. All the settings are correct. So I don't know what's going on. It's kind of weird. Like the R5 Mark II comes out and all of a sudden the R5 can't focus. And I've made videos here on YouTube wearing glasses before, and I haven't had any issues with autofocus jumping around. So I don't know what's going on. I know it's annoying, so I just wanted to jump in and apologize for that. And yeah, let's get back into the video because there's some good content coming up. Cropping aspect ratio. So this is pretty standard stuff for most of you. You already know this, but if you're new to the Canon system or new to shooting RAW and all that stuff, here's full. So they'll give you like the full sensor readout. 1.6 is the APS-C crop of the full frame sensor. So technically, if you have like a 200mm lens, you'll get a times 1.6 extension on that lens because it crops into the image. I don't really recommend using this because you can always crop in post instead of cropping in camera. And by the way, all these settings here, if you're shooting RAW, you'll still be able to uncrop your image in Lightroom or Capture One or whatever. 4:3 is good for magazines. So if you're shooting for magazines, that's a good aspect ratio there. I set my camera to 16:9 only when I shoot YouTube thumbnails because those thumbnails are 16:9. But other than that, I keep it on full. All right, so I'm not gonna go through every single setting in the menu. I'm just gonna go through the stuff that I think is important for photography. Auto exposure bracketing, I'm gonna skip. ISO speed settings. Okay, this is very important for those of us who shoot weddings, events, sports, that kind of thing. So we pop in here and you can see my current ISO speed is 640. ISO speed range is the speed or the ISO speeds that you have access to. So if you set this, for example, to 200, no, let's set it to 400. So if I hit OK and I go out here, if I roll my wheel, double tap to get this info off of here. So if I roll my wheel, you can see in the bottom right corner, I can only go between 200 and 400. So it limits me to only those ISOs. So let's get out of here and fix that because I'll end up somewhere trying to shoot something and yeah, I'll be like, whoa, what's going on with my camera? So 128 is usually where I keep it. You can probably shoot a little bit higher, but that's usually my comfort zone, so I just stay in there. Auto range is a little different. So ISO speed range is for manual mode, auto range is for automatic mode. So not just P mode. I mean, if you're shooting aperture priority, shutter priority, or FV mode and you set your ISO to auto, this is where you limit your camera to what ISOs it can select. So same thing here, you select your maximum and your minimum and the camera will operate in that range when it's set to automatic ISO. Minimum shutter speed. Okay, so this is different. This will, so you have auto and manual here as well. Auto, slower, faster. Okay, so they changed this up. That's my first time looking in the auto mode. I don't really shoot auto. So I guess if I click auto, I could roll this. Okay, so I can tell that I prefer it to be slower or faster in auto mode. Obviously, you probably want it faster so you don't get blurry shots, but I don't mess around with auto mode, so to manual it is. So again, here you can set your minimum shutter speeds, and there's benefits and drawbacks, obviously. So remember the rule, your shutter speed should be double your focal length. So if you're shooting with a 200mm lens, your min shutter speed should be 400 or 500 in this case. So you set it there. If you're shooting with a 500mm lens, 1000 shutter speed, you know how it works, right? So with a wider angle lens, you can get away with a slower shutter speed, but in general for handheld shooting, and I know this has IBIS, but IBIS again only works if you're perfectly still and your subject is still. If they're moving around, you're moving around, it doesn't work. So both of you have to be still for that to work. All right, so for me, shooting at 1/25th of a second is my ideal speed for handheld shooting, so I keep it there or faster. So the slowest I'll go is 1/25th of a second. All right, anti-flicker shooting, HF anti-flicker shooting, that's for shooting in situations where you're in a place where the lights are flickering and you're seeing banding in your photos or videos, and you'll just see horizontal lines, especially in the photos, and it just looks awkward. So you want to turn on the anti-flicker shooting to get rid of that. All right, metering modes. So you have evaluative, partial metering, spot metering, center weight metering. Anyway, information is up here on the screen if you don't know what all four of these do. So you can just pause the video here, take a look, and back to the menu. All right, so now let's talk about picture styles and why they're useful and useless depending on how you use them. All right, so in the menu here, you have picture styles. You click on that and you have a bunch of different picture styles: auto, standard, portrait, landscape, fine detail, neutral, faithful, monochrome. And you have 3 user presets, which you can, adjust on your own if you'd like. So you have all these different settings in here. And it'd be really cool, Canon. Again, it would be super awesome if someone from Canon watched this video and did this. Instead of having, how do I get out of here? Let's go back. So instead of having these settings like user defined 1, 2, 3, what if we could upload our own LUTs or our own kind of presets into the camera, which will affect color and all that other fun stuff? So if we could somehow get LUTs onto a memory card, load it into the camera, and replace user 1, 2, 3 with our own LUTs, that would be so awesome, and it would help take this camera to the next level. Anyway, again, just food for thought, but here's the useful and useless nature of picture styles. One, they only affect JPEGs, not RAW. So if you're just shooting RAW and shooting for yourself, doesn't matter, ignore this completely. But if you're shooting for a client and the client is looking over your shoulder at your camera screen, or you're tethered to another monitor and the pictures are showing up there, the camera is going to display the JPEG from the camera. So definitely set it to large JPEG. You saw that in the beginning of the video. Set it to large JPEG. Set up one of your picture styles to make your subject matter look good, or you can jump into one of the user settings and make the colors pop, make the contrast pop, the clarity, sharpness, all that stuff. So you can make, I don't want to say you can edit the image in camera, but you can try and optimize the image to look as good as possible. So when the client looks at it on the monitor, they're like, oh yeah, it looks good, as opposed to like, I don't know, things look a little weird. You know what I mean? Okay, so enough with that. Let's go on to the next thing. Color space, sRGB. You have Adobe RGB as well. I always leave it on sRGB. Now here's the interesting thing. You have auto lighting optimizer and highlight tone priority in this menu, and you can turn them both on at the same time. Now on the previous R5, you could only have one or the other on, but not both. So I can't find any information about lighting optimizer. Oh, no, this isn't lighting optimizer. What is this? Yeah, auto lighting optimizer, I was right. So before, on the R5, this only affected JPEGs and not RAW, so I just kept it off all the time. I've been looking online. I can't seem to find any information on auto lighting optimizer if it affects JPEGs and RAWs or only JPEGs. I'm not sure. I just leave it on standard. I leave it on. If it affects the RAWs, so be it. If it doesn't, whatever. Highlight tone priority is something else completely, and this is a really handy feature, especially if you shoot weddings, because it'll help you preserve details and highlights. And of course, you're shooting a wedding, you've got a bride in a white dress, a groom in a black tux, they're outside under sunlight, you're using a flash. It's so easy to blow out the dress and lose all those little fine details in the dress. And of course, those details, they're important, especially to your client, the bride, right? So when you enable auto lighting optimizer, you have 2 options, D+ and D+2. Obviously, D+2 is a greater strength. It preserves more details. But the downside is, and it's not really much of a downside, the downside is you can't go below ISO 200. So your minimum ISO now becomes ISO 200, and the camera preserves details in the highlights. So if you need to shoot at ISO 100 or 50, then, you know, obviously turn this off. But in general, I think it's pretty awesome to have it on. Even if you shoot landscapes, you know, you don't want to blow at the clouds or something like that. So I find it pretty handy. It's on all the time. I never turn it off. All right, white balance. So Canon white balance is pretty awesome. I just keep my Canon on auto white balance all the time because it does a good job. But in certain situations, let's say you're shooting an event and there's two photographers, or you're shooting video especially and there's two angles. You want to make sure your white balance is totally customized. So you go here and you set your white balance in both cameras, like absolutely identical. So when you look at the photos from both cameras or the video footage from both cameras, they both have the same white balance. That's a pro tip right there. Trust me, it'll save you a lot of headaches. Experience. So here's the interesting thing here. You have not one, not two, not three, not four, but five custom white balances which you can load into your R5, and unfortunately Canon hasn't changed the way that you set your custom white balance. You still have to take a photo or present a photo to the camera via memory card and then tell the camera to register that Kelvin temperature to that photo, and then that's how it figures out the custom white balance, as opposed to some other systems where you just have like a little dot, you point at something and it'll just take the white balance from that thing. So hopefully Canon fixes that in firmware. It would be pretty handy. But in any case, you have 5 custom white balances you can load in the camera, and that's super handy. So let's say you're shooting an event, a wedding, something like that. You're shooting outdoors, you're shooting indoors. Let's say there's a room and all the walls are green, you know, so you're gonna have a funky white balance in there, different for outside, inside, fluorescent lighting, incandescent lighting, blah, 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 blah. So you can set up 5 custom white balances for each one of those rooms that you're going to be shooting in, and obviously you just have to remember to switch it when you switch rooms, and you're good to go. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty awesome. I like that. I don't know if I'm going to use that feature a lot. I don't know if I'm going to use all 5, but I'll definitely use 2 or 3. And you can save that into your custom settings. So you can have like custom 1 for outdoors, custom 2 for indoors, custom 3 for that crazy green room, and you're good to go. All right, so now let's talk about lens aberration correction. Just turn it on. Just turn it on. Sometimes with lenses, like, I feel like camera companies or lens manufacturers are getting really lazy with lens designs, and they're using optics which create distortion in the lenses, and they create vignette and all that kind of stuff. Like if you look at Canon's 16mm f2.8 and you turn off peripheral illumination or all the lens correction, you get this really wonky distorted image. So all these lenses have corrections happening in camera. So I don't know, I think manufacturers are getting lazy personally. Just create good optics that produce good quality images onto the sensor, and don't rely on post-processing in camera to correct your lenses. Like, just make good quality lenses. Anyway, mini rant over, but in any case, turn on all of this stuff. Peripheral illumination correction will get rid of vignette. Distortion correction will, you know, correct any distortions in the lens. Like even with the 24-105 f4L lens, if you're shooting, let's say the water on the horizon, if you don't have these distortion correction on, you'll see a little bowing happening in the water. So definitely turn these guys on. And Digital Lens Optimizer just optimizes the settings for your lens. So I just keep it on standard, and that's it. I just keep everything on, and I don't have to worry about too much distortion. Drive mode. So we have regular single shot, we have high speed continuous, low speed continuous, and you have 10-second timer, 2-second timer, and this is a continuous timer. So I usually keep this on single shot because I shoot portraits of people. I don't really need high speed, but if you want to access pre-shooting, you have to turn on the high speed. So now we have to go in here and enable pre-shooting. So now it'll shoot before I shoot. Oh, it's crazy fast. All right, silent shutter. If you don't want to be heard, you want to be a ninja photographer, silent shutter, definitely turn that on. So let's see. Oh, I still hear a little. You can hear the electronics or whatever in there, something happening, but it's pretty quiet. I don't think anybody more than like 6 inches from your camera is going to hear anything. I turn that off. And my shutter mode, I like to leave it on mechanical. I just love the sound of shutters. I guess it's part of what makes photography exciting is the sound of the shutter. So I leave that on, and let's turn this off. I just want single shot. Okay, customize quick controls. So if you don't know what quick controls are, hit the Q menu. Oh, let's get out of here and go hit the Q menu. So all these controls are on the outside here. This is your quick menu, Q menu. So you can adjust all sorts of things: autofocus, RAW, SRAW, drive mode, size of your image, flicker, white balance. All that stuff is here, and you can just quickly use your buttons to change it. So if you want to customize that, you can edit the layout and clear all items, reset items, do all that stuff. Quick controls. Watch this. There's an animation. How's that for pretty cool, right? That's the first time I've seen an animation in a Canon camera. So yeah, they're doing some cool new things. So yeah, you can just customize stuff here. Here's a quick little run through of all the icons. Actually, you know what? Here, I'm just going to go quickly through everything so you can see what they are. All right, so any of those things you can add to your quick menu on the front of the camera. So that is awesome. All right, so next up we have image review, and I usually turn this off unless I'm shooting in studio. If I'm shooting in studio with flash or studio strobes, obviously your settings are a little different on the camera and you want to be able to review because you don't have live view in those situations. So I usually shoot natural light, or at least I am right now, so I keep that off. And there we go. And of course you can set it to like 2 seconds, 4 seconds, 8 seconds, or just hold, but just leave it off unless you absolutely need it. High speed display. So my drive mode has to be set to high in order for that to work. So let's set that H. All right, so we can turn that on if we want. High speed display. I leave it off because again, I don't shoot sports or anything that moves fast, so it doesn't make a difference. Blackout-free display. Shutter mode. Okay, so in order to have a blackout-free display, shutter mode, we have to be in electronic. And now we can turn on blackout-free display. So let's see what that looks like. Okay, just flashing lights around the outside. And if it's off, how bad is the, I never really, so only the first shot has a blackout, and then after that, there's no blackout. Okay, it doesn't really make much of a difference. So I'm gonna leave that off. Display simulation. Okay, so this is important. I was talking about this a little bit earlier. So if you're shooting in, let's say, a studio environment where you have a speed light on your camera or using studio strobes, if you're shooting indoors, you're probably gonna be at f9, ISO 200, and your flashes are going to illuminate the shot. But if you don't have your flashes firing, obviously they only fire for like 1/200th of a second or something. They're not firing constantly. So your camera settings are going to give you a very dark display on the back of your screen if you have exposure simulation turned on. So you have to turn it off. So where is disabled? So disable your exposure simulation if you're shooting with studio strobes or flashes. And then if you're shooting with natural light or video lights as your key light, then turn exposure simulation on. All right, so now we have shooting info display, and that's basically what you see when you're shooting your images. So your screen info settings, you have all these different screens on here, so you can turn them off and on. Like for me, this screen is useless and the level is useless, so I just turn them off so I don't have to cycle through them. So just basically these two settings, and you can set it up for yourself however you like. And then we have VF info toggle settings. So this is for your viewfinder. And you have different settings here. I'm going to turn this level off because I'm not going to use it. And there we go. And VF vertical display on. So that's basically when you turn your camera into vertical position, all the settings that are at the bottom will now reorientate them to the bottom of your screen as opposed to being on the side of the screen. So it all comes down to preference, whatever you're used to. And grid display. So I like shooting in the rule of thirds, and it gives me this grid display like that. And if we switch that up, info shooting display, let's say we go to this. You probably saw those pictures of the moon, you know, shot with the Hasselblad back in the day that had grids like this. So depending on what you're shooting and what you need, you can turn that on, and you can turn them all off too. I mean, if you want, just have a clean screen, it's up to you. Histogram display, so you can have it either display brightness or RGB, up to you. And then you can have it large or small for your histogram. All right, auto power off temp. You want to set this to high. By default, it'll be set to standard. And what you want to do is set it to high, which will allow your camera to operate at higher temperatures. This is more beneficial for videographers than photographers. But I mean, if you shoot in the desert and it's hot and the camera sensor starts flashing, saying it's about to overheat, then definitely turn this on and set it to high. All right, next, oh, that's it for the red menu. Let's jump into the autofocus menu. All right, so AF operation, you have three options here. You have one shot, AI focus, servo. So one shot is basically when you depress the shutter halfway or hit the rear button autofocus button, the camera will focus. And then when you push the shutter down all the way, it'll take the shot. Downside to that is, like I said, I shoot people who are sitting or posing, so it doesn't make a difference. But if you're shooting things that are moving fast, the time difference between you half pressing the shutter and pushing it all the way, the subject matter could have moved and drifted out of focus. So you don't want to shoot with one shot if you're shooting things that are moving fast. AI focus is the camera determines what's happening and uses one or the other. Servo is continuous autofocus. So the camera's continually autofocusing on something. Downside to that is it will drain your battery fast. So if you're tracking stuff, bring a lot of batteries with you. Now let's talk AF area. So here you have your different autofocus types, your spot, one spot AF, expanded area AF, yada, 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 yada. I usually just keep it on whole area because I'm tracking eyes. All right, so you can also pick which subject you want to detect. So you have auto, people, animals, vehicles, and I'm really honestly super disappointed by this. This is the R5 Mark II. This is like Canon's almost flagship camera. Why do we only have three things here? I don't understand. There should be airplanes. Like recently there was an air show in Toronto and I went to shoot the air show, and if a bird came in front of the plane, it tracked the bird. And if the plane there's like this water breaker on the water to prevent the tide from eroding the beach. And if the planes got close to the water, it would focus on the breaker wall instead of the airplane. So it focused on whatever's closer. And I set it to vehicle tracking. I assume vehicles, airplanes, maybe it's the same thing, but the camera doesn't recognize the airplane. It just tracks it because it's, the only thing on a blue sky, but there's no airplane tracking here. And I guess animal tracking should track birds, but there really should be bird tracking and animal tracking because you've got different movements for four-legged animals or two-legged animals and then birds. I really am disappointed. So Canon, hopefully in firmware, you can add a lot more options in here. Animals with four legs, animals with wings, fish, airplanes, cars, motorcycles. Like, it should have more options. It should be robust, especially with a camera at this price point. I mean, that's me, a little rant here, but yeah. So eye detection, you can set it to auto, and auto basically means the camera will just select which eye, but you can hit the joystick to go left and right between eyes if you want, or you can select only right eye, only left eye, or disable the whole thing altogether. So that's a cool option. And another really cool feature that's in the Mark II that wasn't in the R5 is register people priority. So you can actually register people. So if you're shooting a wedding, and apparently depending on the order in which these are registered, that's the order of priority. So if you're shooting a wedding, register the bride first, then the groom, and then the bridesmaids. If you're shooting sports, you can, put the quarterback's face in there, although they're wearing a helmet. But in any case, you know what I mean? You can register the person's face in the camera, and the camera will, if it picks them out of a crowd, it'll focus on them before it focuses on anyone else. So another really cool thing is action priority, which is disabled. Subject to detect has to be set to people. So now we can enable action priority. So action priority is kind of like those focus modes. So if you're shooting soccer, basketball, volleyball, the camera will recognize those sports and it'll adapt how it autofocuses to tracking the person with the ball or whatever the case may be. So if you shoot sports, this is super handy for you. They don't have a wedding and event photography section, so it doesn't really apply to me. So now we have servo first image priority, and when you go into this menu, you have options. You can set it to focus, equal priority, or release priority. So do you want the camera to prioritize just releasing the shutter and getting the shot, even if it's not in focus, or do you want to make sure it's in focus first before the shutter's released? So you can kind of set it up. Sometimes, like if you're shooting, let's say journalism or sports, and sometimes you just want to get the shot, even if it's slightly out of focus, it doesn't matter. You still got the shot. But for me, I just would prefer if it's in focus more than anything else. One shot, AF release priority. So this is for one shot, same kind of deal, release, focus priority. So here we have AF assist beam. You can turn that on or off. And it kind of like if it's too dark for the camera to focus, there's a little light here and it'll fire a little beam. And sometimes it's distracting to the subject matter. If you're shooting weddings or something, it'll distract people because all of a sudden there's a light somewhere and people's faces change because they see this light pointing at them. It's not super bright or anything like that, but it's enough to distract and sort of change the nature of the moment. And as a wedding photographer, you're capturing the moment. You're not trying to create the moment. So if you're shooting weddings, maybe keep that off. If you're shooting portraits at night or sports or something like that, keep it on. It's not really going to affect anything on the field. And you know, if someone knows they're being photographed, it's not going to change anything either. But it's just like if you're doing photojournalistic style photos, it will alert people that you're taking a photo. So it's just something to keep in mind. Limit subject to detect. And again, I find this kind of hilarious because what do you have? You have 3 subjects. Ooh, like Canon, add some more subjects here. Limit subjects to detect. Oh, okay, let's take off cars, a cat. Yeah, let's move on. Left eye, right eye detection. Now, to simplify the menu, this should have been in the other section, but you can tell the camera, like, only focus on right eyes, only focus on left eyes, turn off eye detection. But in any case, yeah, if you want to prioritize one eye over the other and lock it into the camera, you can do it there. And that brings us to one of the new features in the Mark II, and that's in-camera upscaling. So you can upscale your photo in camera. Why you would need that, I have no idea, but if you're somebody who needs that and that's the feature you wanted, there you go. It's in the menu. All right, so highlight alert, and this is another area where I think Canon failed on the Mark II. They should have upgraded this. And hopefully, fingers crossed, Canon, if you watch this video again, hopefully this is something you fix in your future cameras, because other brands like Leica, Fuji, if you set highlight alert and you enable it, it'll actually show you in live view in your, what's it called? Exposure simulation. Like, for example, here I'm pointing at this light, or here I'm pointing at this giant light, and that would be blinking black, or there'd be zebra stripes on it to let you know, hey, that's blown out. But unfortunately, in the Canon menu, if you enable highlight tone priority, you can only see the blown out parts of your image in playback. So you have to hit the play button, look at the image, and if you have like black areas blinking on the model's face, you're like, oh, I overexposed her face. I better change my settings. But it's such a slow process, because by the time you do that and you check your photos, everything's changed, the mood's changed, the expression's changed on the model, you know? It's frustrating. It should be live. So if you enable highlight tone or highlight alert, it should be live in the screen. Have zebras on the model's face. I mean, if you can have it in live view in video, there's no reason why it can't be in live view in photo. So Canon, please fix that. This is a flagship level camera with a big price tag, and I expect it to have the features I need. And this is a feature that would be really handy for a lot of photographers. So Canon, please fix that. All right, this setting isn't going to improve your photography or make your images look better, but it's a user experience. So you go to file naming, you select stills, change user settings 1, and you could rename the prefix in your images. So you'll have whatever name you want and then the image number. So if you want to put the client's name in there, you want to put your name, change it to something so it shows up differently alphabetically on your computer when you sort your images. There you go. All right, so now let's talk about beeps. Here you can disable or enable beeps. So the camera will beep when you achieve focus. So if you want to know that 100% your shot's in focus, your camera will go beep. And for me personally, I've been a photographer for 19 years, so I've heard enough beeps. So disabled. I don't want to hear another beep again. Thank you very much. Okay, let's talk about screen brightness and viewfinder brightness. I keep them both to 4 because I found that when I had it set to auto, sometimes I'm looking at the OVF and the image is, you know, too bright or too dark, so I adjust the exposure and then take some shots, and then I'm looking at the LCD, and the LCD is a different brightness, so then I brighten or dim my image, and then it's not the same, it's inconsistent. So when I look at the images on my computer, some are brighter, some are darker. So now I just set them both to 4, so they're both the same, and it seemed to have solved the problem. So if that's an issue you're running into, try and set your screen and LCD to the same brightness. All right, so this is the holy grail of settings, shutter at shutdown. I don't remember if this is open or closed by default, but set it to close. So what that means is when you turn off the camera, the shutter closes. And like if you're shooting in a wedding hall, for example, there's carpets and people running around and dancing. Dust is all over the place. And when you take the lens off the front of your camera, if you don't have a shutter that comes down and protects your camera, of course, your sensor's negatively charged, so dust just sticks to it. It just wants to stick to it. So when the shutter comes down, you can hear it. It goes ching ching, and then you change your lenses, and you don't have to worry about dust getting onto your sensor, because, like, trust me, there's nothing worse than coming home from a shoot and then you see dust spots everywhere in the same places and you have to edit them out like 100 times and it's just frustrating. So definitely have the shutter set to down. And then here's your sensor cleaning options. So you can, I have it to auto cleaning. So every time I turn off and on the camera, it shakes the sensor and it kind of slows down the camera. So when I first turn on the camera, it goes sensor cleaning and you have that little like message. I can't show it now because it'll disconnect the recording. But I did notice this. While the sensor's cleaning, if you hit the shutter button, it'll disengage the sensor cleaning and you can go to shooting right away. Otherwise, it'll take a second from turn on to sensor cleaning to being able to shoot. So cool little tip there. So if you're shooting sports or something, you just need to get the shot right away. Just tap the shutter button, it'll go right into shooting mode and skip the sensor cleaning. All right, now we have custom shooting mode, C1, C2, C3. And again, I'm gonna gripe here with Canon. This is an R5 Mark II, it's 2024. Why are there only 3 custom modes? It should be 6. Like, you know what I mean? It's just little memory on the camera. It's not like, this is a computer anyway. If you open up one of these, it's not full of gears and sprockets and springs. It's an electronic device. It's like a phone. So, I mean, you could easily put 10 custom settings in here if you want. You know what I mean? It's not a big deal. So give us some more custom settings. So with that being said, once you have your settings set on your camera, you can register settings C1, C2, C3. So whatever settings, let's set them to C1. Okay, registered. Please wait, busy. Now, if I switch it to C1, you can do that with the mode dial. Here we have C1, C2, C3. So we can, oh, you can see the different settings in here already. One's got different distortion. Look at that, C3 set for something else. Anyway, okay, that's cool. But yeah, so you can set that. And like I said, Canon, give us more custom options. I mean, it doesn't, like, it's just digital. It's all ones and zeros. It's just programming. Like, you can put 100 in here if you want. Next up, we have save load cam settings to card. Now, as far as I know, the R5 Mark II, the R1 and R3 have this. I assume the R5C has it. So what you can do is you can save, first of all, get a small memory card, get a little 5 gigger or 2 gigger, you know, pop it in there, format it first, then pop it in there, and then you can save your settings to card, which is pretty cool. Oh, I'm saving some settings to card, and then I could load from card. If I go save and then I hit info, oh, I hit the wrong button, save to card, info, you can actually name your settings. You have a maximum of 8 characters. So you can have settings for weddings, you can have settings for slow motion video, settings for studio portraits, settings for natural light portraits, settings for shooting sports, whatever the case may be, you can save your settings to a card, and then whenever you need them, you can load them onto your camera. Now, the other benefit to this is the fact that, let's say you have 2 shooters and you're both shooting with R5 Mark IIs, or something happens to your camera and you got to get a loaner. You can have all your settings on a card, pop it into the new camera or other camera, and load up the settings onto the new camera. So it's basically the same camera and you don't have to fiddle with the settings again. So that's pretty cool. Thank you, Canon, for that. All right, so let's talk about copyright information. Now, a lot of people will skip over this completely. They won't even put it into their camera. Don't be a fool. You got to do it. I've been in this business a long time. I've seen a lot of crazy stuff happen. So definitely put in your copyright information, your author's name, put in your name, and then, yes, okay, can't, whatever. Enter copyright details. I just put my website. So here's the thing. If somebody takes your photo and claims it is theirs, look at the EXIF data, your copyright information is going to be in there. A lot of people don't know how to clear EXIF data, so it's always going to be there. And even if they do clear it, you have the raw file with your EXIF data in it. So you'll always be protected. If somebody uses your image without permission or claims it's yours, call your lawyer, send a cease and desist, sue them, whatever. You have all the information in your EXIF data on your raw files. Protect yourself. That's all I'm going to say about that. Now, at the end of the yellow tab, we have firmware. So obviously, brand new camera, firmware 1.0.0. But here's where you select camera firmware or lens firmware. So you can download the firmware from the Canon website, put it on your memory card, extract the zip file. I got a video about how to do the firmware on the R5. It's probably going to be the same technique on the R5 Mark II, but you get the firmware on your memory card and then you select whether you want to update the firmware on the camera or the lens. And there you go. Pretty simple stuff. Okay, eye control is off for the moment. I haven't played with it. I haven't tested it. I haven't set it up. I haven't registered my eye to anything. I'm going to make a video and I'm just going to go through it with you guys and I'm going to learn with you how it works and we'll set it up. So that's going to be a future video. I'm not going to talk about it here because I don't know anything about it, so I can't talk about it. All right, so now we have set shutter speed range and set aperture range, and they're super handy, although I don't know why you would want to set your aperture range, but you can. So set shutter speed range is basically you have mechanical shutter, electronic first person shutter, and you can set your minimum speed and your maximum speed, and the camera will only operate within those speeds. And then an electronic shutter, you can set it differently. So you can have different settings for mechanical and electronic. And then here we have set aperture range, and same thing, you set your min and your max, and there you go. And the camera won't go outside your range. All right, thank you for watching. And if you found this video helpful, definitely subscribe to the channel and also help me out by leaving a comment down below. Would really appreciate it. And if you want to talk to me more directly or share your photos or talk about cameras or anything like that, definitely join the Discord, link down below in the description, and I'll see you on the Discord. And that is it for this video. Peace out, and I'll see you in the next one.